Hi, everyone. My name is Haley Rose Hajar, and I'm excited to be joining you today as a contributor to the Alliance for American Rule of Law, which is a group of lawyers and former judges and other professionals who've worked for years promoting the rule of law abroad, largely through programs funded by the United States Agency for International Development, or USAID, and the U.S. Department of State. And now we're turning our gaze towards the American system and our state of rule of law in the US as we see a lot of concerning developments and challenges here. I've worked for years as a non lawyer in this environment, working with teams in the US and in all of our partner countries to strengthen the rule of law in various ways. And I joined my colleagues with law degrees in this concern. And I also joined my colleagues in looking toward those partners and seeing how we can learn from them through their experiences of, building the rule of law and seeing it erode in their countries. So today, I am even more excited to be joined by Judge Sonja Prostran, who joins us as an expert in judicial administration and judicial reform. Sonja began her career in the courts of Serbia in 1998, where she worked as a judge for 16 years. And after working as a judge, she took that expertise and that experience and she applied it to international projects focused on improving justice administration and the rule of law through USAID and other various international cooperation mechanisms. Sonja brings that expertise to our conversation today to tell us a little bit more her perspective on how the rule of law manifests itself, or the lack of the rule of law manifests itself, both in the courtroom and in everyday life. And as a person who's worked with Sonja on several projects funded by USAID and implemented by the East-West Management Institute, that makes me even more excited to hear Sonja's thoughts today, her valuable perspective on these challenges. So welcome, Sonja. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you, Haley. I am so happy to be rejoined with you, working on this exciting series of podcasts. I'm also honored to be the first foreign justice professional or rule of law expert to be participating in this Alliance for American Rule of Law series. Although I don't think we should actually call it American. I think it's a global alliance, given the rule of law challenges many of the countries face at the moment. As you've probably have seen, the latest rule of law index published by World Justice Project on October the 25th, 68% of the countries that are encompassed by the rule of law index demonstrate the decline of the rule of law in various ways. And I think this is probably their worst report so far. I'm also excited to share some of my thoughts and experiences about the rule of law developments or underdevelopments in Serbia and elsewhere. I have worked as a judge in Serbia for 16 years, but for a great deal of time during these 16 years, I also dedicated to the development. So it was both through and after my judicial career that I worked on different rule of law projects, mostly with the USAID, which I really find the most effective development agency I worked with. And I'm happy to talk about that more, but also with the Council of Europe, EU delegation, and the World Bank. So I'm really excited to, be conversing with you on these issues today.
The feeling is mutual, Sonja. So, as I've mentioned, you began your career in the rule of law sphere as a judge in Serbia at what was a very pivotal time for your country over your tenure as a judge. And then you took that experience and you applied it to these international projects, both working on the rule of law and the justice system in Serbia, but also Armenia, Ukraine, countries of the former Yugoslavia, and most recently in Uzbekistan. So I'm wondering if you could just set the scene and give us a little bit of context for how your career in the rule of law sphere took shape.
Yeah, I'll be happy to. Thank you. Um, the my most narrow specialization during studies was the international humanitarian and human rights law, and I was able to apply this knowledge even before I became a judge. For 3 years, I was the spokesperson of the Specialized War Crimes Court in Belgrade. And just as a reminder to your audience, these courts, the courts across former Yugoslavia, were complementary to the International Criminal Tribunal for former Yugoslavia that existed in The Hague, the Netherlands. And through that work, I was able to get exposed to various regional and international experiences. But I was also able to perceive actually how important it is to communicate complex legal issues to the public, particularly to the public, which was not very happy to to see that these trials actually are taking place in their own country. Um, Other than, I mean, that was just the beginning. Throughout my career, there is probably not very many rule of law issues that I haven't dealt with. I dealt with whistleblowers protection, with data protection, human rights protection in various ways, both academically but also in in-depth research of the cases of the European Court for Human Rights, and how this case law is implemented into the national judicial system. So, basically, there is really not very much that I haven't dealt with. However, the foundation of the International Association for Court Administration, and I was a part of that founding group, kind of determined my career onwards. In the sense that I realized that actually the court or judicial administration, court administration is something that has been or was heavily underdeveloped in many European countries, including including my own, but also Western Balkans in general. And I was actually very lucky to be able to expand my knowledge with respect to judicial administration. Like very early on in when I was with Judicial, I realized that basically courts are run either like businesses or like households, that the courts need to have budget, that they need to have human resources and other resources, and that they have a very important supporting staff that helps bring justice to the people. That courts are not really all about the judges. So that is what determined my career in the development as well. So I had this opportunity to work in almost all countries of former Yugoslavia, mostly on either on the citizens engagements with courts or on various judicial administration initiatives, as well as the countries of former Soviet Union. And very recently I came back from the last one from Uzbekistan, where I was implementing a USAID rule of law project. Um, the I have to say that out of all the development agencies I worked with, I would say that USAID had this very direct approach. It is very difficult to turn the rule of law as such, as something that people usually do not comprehend other than as a principle, to turn it into action. But working with USAID, actually, USAID had the most effective tools, the most effective approaches to do that. Um, we used to say, I mean, we people working on USAID projects used to say that we were the only ones that would roll up our sleeves and actually work on the ground to enable people to exercise their rights more effectively, more efficiently, and with more quality. And that was all about USAID. We now see people centered justice movements across the world, and there are several international organizations that are now leading in this area. But I would say that USAID has done that all along, from 1960s onwards, was actually, helping people access justice, helping people exercise their rights before the courts or administrative bodies. That was the difference, I would say.
I think that's a really good point, and something that gets lost in this conversation so much is that courts serve people, and people need to be able to actually exercise their rights, the people that rely on the justice that's executed through the courts. And both that linkage, the civic engagement, the court public engagement that you're talking about, but also the nature of people-centered justice gets lost a lot. And USA did a lot, as you said, to try and bring justice into people's everyday lives. And sometimes we forget that here in the US because not many people, relative to some other countries in the world, in the US often come into interaction with the court system. So it can seem a little bit foreign to us sometimes. I'm curious, though, if you want to share any of your perspective on why you decided to take your experience and your expertise in the Serbian context and start applying it to these international projects. What was it that motivated you or drew you to working in the international sphere?
Well, the reasons are, I would say, twofold. The first one being, I thought that more people could contribute from my skills and knowledge than only people I work with in the court or in the courtroom. Um, Secondly, I mean, the reason why I started seeking a more international career was that the pressure on the judges from the executive power has been continuously growing in Serbia ever since I've joined the judiciary in late 90s of the last millennium. And I was actually, well, not really threatened, but the project I was working with at the time had a threat from a governmental beneficiary that the government will seize the cooperation with our project if I wouldn't delete a post I made on LinkedIn. Since that really was, not only shrinking but attacking the freedom of expression imminent to every single person in this world, not only judges, right? I felt that the space for me to, express myself, to share my expertise in my country shrank significantly. And that was basically the reason I tried to find a niche elsewhere where I could work without this pressure.
Without this pressure and with the ability to make a difference, which you have in these other countries. And as you've alluded to, Serbia has been engaging in this fight for the rule of law for decades now. And even right at this moment has a very interesting, very compelling pro-democracy movement that's been building across the country for the past year. Youth-led, complex, and it's really starting to catch the attention of some international observers, and really inspiring people around the world by what they're seeing. So I'm wondering if you can give our audience a little bit more context about how you've seen the rule of law in Serbia, develop, disappear, and just change over this period of time up until today.
Before I touch upon the current events in Serbia, I would really like to give a small retrospective and actually a series of events that led to the protests that are currently going on in Serbia. For the past decade or so, the rule of law has been systemically jeopardized or overlooked or destroyed in this country. Mind you, the situation was not ideal even at the end of the 90s, begin of the 2000s. We had a small moment of light at the beginning of the 2000s, but unfortunately, even at that time, the judiciary was basically under threat. So we could not say that the rule of law was blooming. In the past decade, there was a series of incidents, mostly related to corruption, that were, I would say, heavily neglected by all three branches of government. Some of them were actually inspired by either executive or legislative branch of the government. The first one being Belgrade waterfront project. This is a massive, controversial urban development project on the Sava riverbank in Belgrade. And it has been in focus of persistent corruption allegations since its announcement, which was more than 10 years, it was like 13 or 14 years ago. In one of the most high profile incidents, masked individuals illegally demolished private buildings in the middle of the night to clean space for this project. There was one casualty, one person died during this incident, and no one was prosecuted. So that was the first one. Then there is a continuous abuse of state resources and vote buying in electoral processes. Numerous reports and investigations by local watchdogs and international organizations have documented the systemic abuse of state resources for the ruling party's campaign and use of parties' call centers, um, which pressured public sector employees mostly, but also others, often engaging in illegal practices like vote buying for real money, for cash, and requiring proof of voting for the ruling party. Um, so this happens continuously throughout all the elections that have been conducted from 2012 onward. Then there is an infamous or famous Jovanjica case. This case involved the discovery of one of the Europe's largest ever illegal marijuana farms on a state subsidized property, on a state subsidized organic farm called Jovanjica. The subsequent investigation revealed alleged ties between the farm owner and the high ranked state security officials and political decision makers. Um, so, this is when the investigation revealed this, the court proceedings have been stalled. They have, I mean, the case is basically not moving forward ever since, and that's been for ages now. Then there is illegal construction and nepotism um, connected to it. Corruption in public procurement, planning, and construction is also a systemic issue. This includes tailor made laws that exempt politically connected projects from public tenders and environmental impact assessments, allowing for massive construction projects to bypass security. This was the case of Novi Sad railway station as well. And also, now I bring us back to the current events. Um, the What actually happened on November the 1st, 2024. The large concrete canopy above the main entrance of the Novi Sad railway station collapsed. Novi Sad is a city, it's the second largest city in Serbia, just 80 kilometers northwards from Belgrade. This collapse tragically killed 16 people and severely injured several. And that incident happened at 11:52 a.m. local time, and I will then explain. I mean, why this timing is important. The station had recently undergone renovations as a part of a larger construction project. This is a railway um, project connecting Belgrade and Budapest, where with a lot of foreign also um, companies involved, mainly Hungarian and Chinese. And the disaster happened shortly after this renovated station was reopened. The canopy collapse ignited one of the largest and most sustained protest movements in Serbia since the 1990s. I think that this tragedy was the last drop in a cup, the last event in the series that involved systemic corruption. Um, the protest was actually initiated by and sustained, that is also important to say, by the university students and youth, mainly from Novi Sad itself. And the students, but then the other major university centers joined, such are Belgrade, Niš, Kragujevac, and others. And students quickly became the face of the protests. The protest began with symbolic silence and blockades. Early on, protesters would hold daily Serbia Stand Still, that was the title, protests, from 11:52 to a.m. to 12:08 p.m. So 16 minutes of silence at the exact time of the collapse for the 16 victims of the tragedy. The initial demands of the protest of the students that were articulated very early on, towards the end of November last year, were addressed at the prosecutor's office, and that was to conduct a transparent investigation into the collapse, and to arrest, or the indictments of the responsible for the tragedy. What actually happened shortly after these demands were articulated was that the prime minister, Serbian prime minister, resigned. Some two other ministers, I think, also resigned. Then two of them were arrested. Both of them were arrested, as well as some lower government officials. None of those arrested initially remained in detention. Many of them were released. However, we still don't have the indictment. And we know nothing, like the general public knows nothing of the investigation. Um, so there is absolutely no transparency, which was demanded. The protests are widely geographically spread. Um, it from Novi Sad, Belgrade, and other university areas. The protests spread to hundreds of cities and towns across Serbia. Um, uniting different segments of society, including farmers, professors, school teachers, and also unions. I have to stress these are entirely peaceful protests. And the tools, I mean, the tactics uh, they use to either block major crossroads, um, um, conduct protest marches in silence, etc. There were, apart from traffic blockades, there were also university occupations. Actually, the students would lock them within the university buildings and would not let others to uh, enter, thus also protecting the autonomy of the university. And then, as of December, the students started long distance marches. So the groups of students and citizens marched for days, covering hundreds of kilometers, um, and actually visiting every single village, every single small town, and thus raising awareness of the concrete event, of the Novi Sad tragedy, but also of all the others that led to them, to that one. And I think that's actually how they gained the strength and also gained the sustainability, because the protests are going on for a year now, and they're not losing neither strength nor momentum um, um, nor their nor numbers. The figures are really impressive. Um, what has government done in the meantime? So the government's early response, apart from the PM resigning, and also a couple of ministers resigning, the government was occasionally offering, actually, the president of the country was occasionally offering a dialogue with the students. Um, Mind you, Serbia is a parliamentary democracy, so by the constitution, the president does not have the power to politically engage or to conduct any political negotiations. So the students, following the constitution, the students said, "We are sorry, but it's not within your competences. So we will not discuss anything with you." The students also, at some point in May this year, the students added to their requests general elections, saying, okay, the current government was incapable to conduct an independent investigation. Obviously, incompetent people carry these jobs or carry this work out. So we would like the general elections to be called, or early parliamentary elections, because the next are set only for 2027. Um, so the government has been, so there were, apart from these several calls for dialogue, the reaction from the government is actually pretty severe, because the government, the initially the protest was dismissed, and the protesters are continuously characterized as foreign influenced, but I wouldn't really know where that influence would come from, um, and also have been accused of attempting to incite violence, which is utterly not true. Um, and um, the and basically what the second kind of consequence was, um, the applying the excessive police brutality to suppress the protests and protesters. Those ended up with thousands of people in jail, or actually with thousands of people arrested, all of them released later with no indictment, uh, but also other pressures. A lot of people under surveillance, students, their parents, etc., etc. So we actually see the increase of police brutality and police action vis-a-vis protests. However, what is, I think, the point of my story, and then I will end this. Um, this actually did not discourage the students. There was a 1 year anniversary of the Novi Sad tragedy. That was on November the 1st. And it saw a massive demonstration. More than 100,000 people converged on Novi Sad to mark this occasion. We see the renewal of long distance marches, even from very remote areas of Serbia. Students from very remote areas now keep marching. Then there are now, I mean, the message from that commemorative gathering on November the 1st was, we will meet again tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, and every single day until we reach justice. And that's actually what we face this early November, that the protests are ongoing in all major cities in Serbia. In Belgrade are the most the most the numerous ones are carried out in Belgrade. We also see in the past 3 days that the high school students, so this is underaged students that have joined this movement, saying that there is no basically reason for them to study and to learn if everything that is going on in this country is corrupt or under question, and if there is really no justice. So this is now a very nationwide fight for the rule of law.
It's really inspiring to me to hear the resilience in the face of those challenges, that repression, the accusations of, violence or terrorism. Um, it's inspiring to hear, I think, from anyone's perspective, but especially with some of the reactions to protests that we've seen here in the US. And I also think that the link that you're sort of touching on between corruption and, government negligence and impunity for that, slowly erodes people's or the government's ability to serve its people. And then, when people don't have the right to gather, the right to speak up in the way that they choose to say, this is not how we want our government to serve us, it's this erosion of both the government's trust with the people, but the rule of law over that period of time. And I think that link between corruption and rule of law and freedom of expression is really interesting and salient for us. I did want to ask really quickly, because one thing that's been observed about these protests in Serbia is their ability to bring together, as you've mentioned, people from all over the country, people from all walks of life, political defectors, people that previously were highly supportive of the regime and have now been disillusioned. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on how the movement has been able to do that. It's a common discussion here in the US. We have a lot of political divides. We want to have a big tent. How do you get people all on board for this type of movement?
It's I think it's all because the protest is led by the youth, um, because it's led by someone's children um, and grandchildren, and these young people are observed as pure they are not untouched in the, they're not corrupted. I mean, not in the, they're not they're not dirty in any way, and they do not have any financial material interest to be in this protest. And also how their demands were articulated in the first place, very very straightforward, very addressed to the prosecutor's office. Like, you could conduct the investigation and make it transparent. Um, I think that's basically, there are several, but the main reason, because it's young people, and you have, I mean, every single person in this country has a compassion with young people. Old ones, young ones, with either left or right political orientation, regardless. I mean, when you see young people actually, suffering with a smile, they walk 400 kilometers. I mean, their feet, you cannot imagine how they look like. And still they are marching, singing, smiling. It also brought together, I mean, it also demonstrated that we are all basically the same. They demonstrated, the youth, they demonstrated that they're all the same, regardless from which background they come from. And there were parts of Serbia which were completely neglected in social and political life, like the southwest of Serbia, which is mainly populated by Bosniaks, people of Islamic religion, and they were cut out. But now, I mean, the students brought us back together. And when you see this footage of these people coming or going through the through various places in Serbia. They were marching from Novi Pazar to Novi Sad, and in they actually they spent one night in a Christian monastery. People of Islamic religion spent a night in Christian monastery. That is something that, I mean, was unimaginable in this country until now. Now I mean, this is um, corruption kills people, but fight against it unites people, because it tackles lives of every single one of us.
It's a really good lesson in coming together across political divides. So, thank you again for sharing that with us. I do want to pivot back to some of your more international experience if we have the opportunity to. You've applied your expertise in Uzbekistan, as we've talked about, Armenia, other countries. Are there any lessons that stick out to you? Any particularly salient lessons about justice, about the rule of law, and how you protect and sustain them that you want to share with our audience?
There are two, but actually they derive from one, and that is that all courts in the world are the same because they have people working in them. Having said that, I think my first lesson would be that judiciary, as the most conservative branch of government, still hasn't learned how to communicate with their users, how to communicate to to the people they serve. And yeah, I will make just one small digression here. I think that first time when I used the term court users in Serbia in my mother tongue, I had the room full of senior judges, and almost all of them left the room, the conference room. And they were very angry. They were saying, um, "We are, we do not have users. We are not a service to have a users." Quite the contrary. I mean, over time, this attitude has obviously changed, but um, the how we understand people we serve is something that has to be upgraded, and that the judges has to be have to be reminded of continuously. We do not communicate effectively to the public how we work and what we do. Um, People should understand that we are the ultimate defense of human rights. And coming back to Serbian protests, they probably wouldn't last this long. Um, haven't the courts acted independently, and haven't the courts actually let people out of the detention imposed by the police or by the prosecutor's office? So this is, this, the people have to understand, like, it's because of the courts. The courts in a way supported what is going on, I mean, by their legal lawful decisions. Um, so we have to find a way to communicate with the media. We have to find a way to communicate effectively using the new media. We have to find a way to engage with young people, with students communities, um, and we have to communicate much better with various communities, not only, for example, civil society organizations, but also with social welfare services, to with all the other services that get somehow have some interaction with the courts. In the countries of common law system, I understand that not every citizen comes across a court during his or her lifetime. In civil law system, it's a little bit different. I mean, at some point in your life, you have to go to a court for one thing or another. Still, and even more, I would say, um, we all have that obligation to educate people, to talk to people about what we do and why we do it. The second, coming again back to the courts are all the same because they have people working in them. Um, no matter how different our backgrounds are, and no matter how different our customs or mentality, although I hate that word, is, um, there are general principles that all judiciaries in the world are guided by, and they are more or less summarized in Bangalore principles, but they are mainly principles of independence and impartiality. And you will recognize them in 99% of all the judges in the world. I mean, the judiciary is not immune to corruption, but 99% of all the judges in the world are good judges. And that's also something that is actually a lesson that has to be taught as well. Just for people to understand that judges didn't become judges just because there was nothing else or nothing better offered, but because deep inside they believe in the rule of law, they believe in justice, and they have the integrity, which means independence and impartiality, to carry out or to deliver it to the people.
Yeah, very well said. And this civic education piece, the public engagement and trust is a common challenge here in the U.S. as well. And to know that your court should stand for these principles of impartiality, efficiency, transparency, you're owed that as a citizen, is something that often gets pushed by the wayside. So I appreciate you highlighting it. And with all of this in mind, in all of your lived experience and your technical expertise in your home country and these other countries, what are some of the red flags or warning signs that come to the top of your mind when it comes to the erosion of the rule of law? What are some things that U.S. audiences should be looking out for, and what can they do when they see them?
Um, I have to say, I mean, we on this side of the Atlantic have been following closely what has been going on in the US. And we had even some predictions of the next steps. So, what is the next thing that the government might do? Because I think we who have lived in the authoritarian regimes or regimes inclining to dictatorships, we kind of recognize the same or similar pattern of behavior. Um, as I mentioned earlier, um, the I think that this corruption in construction or in public procurements regarding constructions um, have been widely spread in Serbia, but I would say all over the world. So I think some analogy what has been going on in this country can be drawn with what has been going on with the White House's East Wing currently. So this is that's one of the red flags. Um, threats to judiciary as a whole and to the individual judges. We have been living this for, I would say, decades, but not until the last government have actually the representatives of the executive branch. They would not really name concrete judges in the public and say, well, this and this judge is against Serbia or is an enemy of Serbia because they passed such and such decision. Would we had like general the government would name, well, I mean not name, describe a judge, and we in judiciary would know who they are talking about. But now we have the president of the republic saying the name of the judge who released someone from the detention, because we have that a lot in the past year. So he actually says her name on television, and then he says, well, her husband is this and this guy, and so it goes on and on and on. We had judges who have also very recently there was a case when judge released someone from the detention again. One of the protesters was arrested, and she received direct death threats. I mean, first she received threats that her child would be kidnapped, and then she received direct death threats. And hadn't it been for a professional association to basically come out immediately and make the threat public and say, okay, we are, judges, members of this association, we will stand by her. We will not allow this to happen, etc., etc. So there was an immediate reaction of professional association. Then the one of the red flags is um, um, two other branches of government, legislator and the executive, not following the court's decisions. We had local elections back in May or in June, and they were not conducted. I mean, the court found that they were not conducted properly for the reasons that I stated earlier in our conversation, and basically ordered that the new elections should be organized and run. We are talking about local elections, and the court passed the same decision twice, in September and in October this year. The minister in charge said, I don't care about the court's decision. The elections will happen when I say so. So, you know, these are all, some red flags that you should be, or my colleagues in the US should be aware that, these things are happening, and the effective measures again to prevent them is to organize or to get together into useful and effective coalitions, whether they're professional associations or associations with similar professions, and also the continuous communication with the media and the public. So make media and public aware of what is going on early on. If this reaction um, does not exist, or if it's absent, I'm afraid that this will only continue. Why? So I have been a part of the judicial system in Serbia, this way or the other, for almost 30 years. And the governments have changed, but and also the parties in power have changed. But their relationship towards judiciary did not change much. If one government in place sees what their predecessors had been doing, um, and how they have been behaving towards judiciary, they will tend to repeat the same. So, regardless of how that government has been elected and who is in power, left, right, center, we don't really care. Um, they tend to behave towards judiciary in the same manner as their predecessors. So tools to defend the profession, but also the entire branch of government, have to be found early on. And also useful coalitions have to be made early on. Otherwise, I'm just afraid that it will take much, much longer time to recover. But in the meantime, the public trust in judiciary, the only thing that judiciary really um, relies on, public trust and confidence, the only thing that judiciary really relies on, will be gone.
It's interesting. And one thing that I'm hearing throughout it is sort of these threats to the role and the authority of the judge and of the courts and of the judiciary as a whole. Within our system in the US, they hold such an important role in ensuring justice is done, in enforcing the law, even when it comes to our leaders, even when it comes to the actions of our government. And we have really seen a startling trend of threats against the authority of an individual judge. We've seen pizza doxing, we've seen threats and actual actions of violence against judges simply by for them seeking to enforce their role, their authority, enforce the law. And that's really concerning. And there have been, some great organizations speaking up about that. The American Bar Association has spoken out with a strong voice. The Article 3 Coalition is doing great work. So, what you're saying, we need to speak out. We need to support those organizations that are speaking out. And I think, perhaps a lot of the American public, we need to do a lot of more when it comes to civic education to ensure people know the role of the judge, the courts, and the value that they bring to our system, the authority that is invested with them and should be protected. Again, some great organizations like iCivics or the American Constitution Center are efforts that as you're speaking, I really appreciate a little bit more, and I think speaks to our need to speak up as citizens, speak up as our political leaders, and encourage everyone to come across the coalitions in society and come together. Sonja, you've given us so much to think about today. You've shared just a wealth of perspective with us on civic engagement, on civic duty, on the rule of law and the role of the courts. Do you have any final parting words for your rule of law colleagues here in the US or globally?
no one is above the law. So, I mean, whoever threatens the judiciary, or whoever tries to destroy the rule of law, um, will and will have his or her day before the court. Let's say that way. I mean, the last example being Nicolas Sarkozy, the former French president. So I would keep reminding people that not that many of them got away with that, or got away what they were doing. So um, um, also, I think sometimes judges have to be reminded of that as well. That the law is in their hands, and no one can take that away from them.
That's excellent. What great parting words. Thank you so much, Sonia. I really appreciate hearing from your perspective and your lived experience on this, and I know the AROL audience will as well. So thank you again for joining us, and keep rooting for us from Serbia.
Well, thank you, Haley. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed our conversation. And also, thank you for following closely what's happening in my home country. And yeah, if you need any more updates on that, you know where to find me.
We'll find
Thank
you,
you very
Sonia.
much.
We'll find you. Okay, thank you so much, Sonia.
Thank you.
Good.
Stop the recording.